The investigation of Bill de Blasio's fundraising, one of many probes the City Hall is dealing with as we speak. We're going to talk to a guy who's been around scandals at City Hall since the Koch administration, and he'll give us some insight into what de Blasio is dealing with. Then Donald Trump accusing Hillary Clinton of playing the gender card, but Hillary embracing it. How she is dealing with this and how this will play out with the women's vote, we'll talk about. Is Trump playing with fire when it comes to this topic? Then Colorado residents, they've already voted to legalize pot. Now they'll get to weigh in on whether or not the state should have universal health care. The question that we're going to get into tonight is the whole idea of these referendums. Should we, the people, have that much power? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a busy week, and this entire week we've been covering the investigation into the de Blasio administration's fundraising practices and how Preet Bharara's office has just handed down subpoenas. Now, that's not the only headache de Blasio dealing with. The Times says this is one of many, and I'm quoting here. Historians have been hard-pressed to find a mayor who, along with his administration and inner circle, has ever been the subject of as many simultaneous investigations conducted by as many different agencies as Mayor de Blasio now faces. Now, among these, they include, of course, the fundraising probe, the investigation of NYPD top brass, and whether some of them traded favors for favorable treatment, the deal that lifted protections on a nursing home, paving the way for luxury condos, and don't forget the ethics probe into Campaign for One New York, de Blasio's since disbanded political group. And we wanted to get some perspective on this, especially from somebody who's been around the block, around City Hall, for a few decades now. And we went to George Arts. George, who many of you may remember, was Mayor Koch's press secretary, and now he's president of George Arts Communications. He's as wired as anybody into how City Hall works. And our own Dominic Carter, he sat down with him just yesterday.
Mr. Arts, you look at today's tabloids, the Post, the News, federal criminal investigation, federal subpoenas. How bad is this looking for Mayor de Blasio?
I think we're just at the beginning. You can't really speculate on potential damage. We don't know that. I was in an administration where there were scandals and we nearly won re-election. Brad Koch's fourth term. It is too early to tell. What is most difficult is how people are doing in City Hall to get the mayor's agenda across. And that is really what's most difficult.
Team de Blasio, Mayor de Blasio, is arguing that this is all politically motivated. But is anybody hearing that?
The newspapers have answered that by discounting that and saying, why didn't you answer the charges, the allegations? So really, crying politics at this point does not help.
You did Bess Meyerson and all the scandals, for the most part, in the Koch years.
It is overwhelming. You're fearful for how your colleagues are going to do before grand juries, before we had the FIRA Commission looking at us and how they do, and you hope that they don't wind up on perjury charges. It takes an enormous amount of time and derails, for the most part, the mayor's agenda. Still, in Koch's fourth term, he got his legacy project across, housing, and he did the gay rights bill at City Hall, which was at the time historic. So you're able to get your agenda across, but there's some things that you drop in while you're doing it.
Will this make the mayor face a serious primary challenge?
It is too early to tell if this lingers on the next year. Certainly there will be people who seriously look at that.
So are 2 terms for de Blasio possibly still in the cards?
I think he certainly is strong, and certainly he will run for a second term, and he'll be difficult to beat at this point.
Finally, Mr. Arts, I conclude this way. How weak is de Blasio looking right now?
It is too early to say, but There are people appearing before grand juries. There are subpoenas going out. So ask me in a month.
And with that, let's bring in our panel. Shelly Mares, a Democratic Assemblywoman representing Yonkers, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. You've seen the litany of charges, and you got Preet Bharara involved in this, and as we know, not to be discounted or treated lightly. What do you think is most troubling and most problematic for the administration right now?
Well, I think from, as George said, from an insider's ball game, the trouble is you have an agenda you're trying to carry out, and I think the mayor is trying to carry out an agenda, and this is a tremendous distraction, and also it takes an emotional toll. And, you know, he wants to accomplish things, whatever they are, and whether people disagree or agree. I mean, whether it's homelessness, housing, he has his own agenda. And this gets in the way every day in the office in carrying out both the interests of the mayor and the ability to be responsive to the people in a way that is totally open, because you start to get skeptical and nervous all the time about hearing people. So it impedes your ability to listen in an honest way, and I think it makes it difficult to carry out the work that the mayor wants to do.
You mentioned difficult, and tabloid front pages notwithstanding, this is dense, the debate about fundraising, how it was done, how the money was solicited, where it went to in the case of Putnam office here and the rest. We had your old colleague, Mr. Brodsky, yesterday, and I think he asked the right question, which was, we still don't know what they did. Forget about what it sounds like and feels like, and certainly they seem to be an attempt to work around the system to get the money to an office to get to another place. We still don't know if it's illegal or not. I mean, that in and of itself is amazing in that we still don't know clearly what you can or can't do as it relates to where you're going to basically solicit the funds or have them sent to and then apply to a state Senate race.
No, exactly. I think that's right. I mean, it's not clear what the lawful boundaries are, and it's frankly not exactly clear what exact things they are alleged to have done. And we haven't seen an indictment, an arrest, or anything like that. I mean, the issuance of subpoenas is not a determination of guilt or even of a charge. The Preet Bharara's office is conducting an inquiry, and they're going to make some preliminary assumptions about what the law allows. And I think we ought to wait and see whether they determine, in their opinion, subject to a judge's decision, what is allegedly unlawful.
Although I think it is something of an indictment on how the system works, both the election system and other fundraising systems work. I mean, the 4 investigations or scandals that we listed before, the fundraising probe, we still don't know whether it's legal or illegal because we don't know what the process is exactly for transferring money to a county party and then having that transferred to other candidates. The ethics probe, the committee for New York, or the campaign for One New York, the outside fundraising mechanism that de Blasio launched in order to try to pursue his agenda and get better PR for it. I mean, Bloomberg did similar things during his administration constantly. He self-funded a lot of those. And so that's also
But you know, Andrew, for me, 2 things on the optics front. First off, when you hear the Bharara's office is investigating, given certainly what we've seen, you know, with Skello Silver and others before them, it definitely sends a chill. Would send a chill down my spine if they were looking at my administration, what was going on and where the buck stops. But intuitively on this one, when you usually see that, you say, somebody, you know, there was greed or graft involved. In the case of de Blasio, and I'll speak for myself here, the first instinct is there's some form of incompetence. He didn't rein in either the staff or they didn't do this. I didn't think he was trying to line his pockets here, but nonetheless, and how he's handled this with, you know, cutting off questions or anything else, it feeds into the Daily News and the Post and every tab, you know, with a front page story with him in a jumpsuit or whatever else. It looks terrible, but to me, I don't even know which is worse, it looks like, you know, they can't run a 2-car funeral out of this city hall versus predecessors.
Which maybe with the impact, particularly of the Board of Elections referral to Preet Bharara, that might be what's driving all of this is PR and you know, hurting de Blasio's image as much as possible. That the State Board of Elections forward this to Bharara's office, I think he's compelled to investigate, or certainly
do an inquiry.
Right, or certainly launch the inquiry. So there's that going on, but the timing of this all is somewhat suspicious to me too. All of a sudden, within the span of 2 weeks, which happens to be just about 2 years before his, or a year and a half before the election. Now this stuff goes to the front pages, and now all of this stuff is happening at the same time. This is the beginning of the ramp up for the re-election campaign. This is when you start focusing on issues and accomplishments and start framing how you're going to launch your campaign for re-election. That's what makes me suspicious, that the timing of all this is designed to sort of puncture one of those tires.
I got
before the
another
target's
one,
going.
which is clearly this thing was leaked. And it isn't just de Blasio who's condemned the leaking of the report. And the fingerprints seem to go directly to the governor on this. And we all know the worst kept secret is there's no love lost between the governor and the mayor. Except the governor's own guy, Joe Percoco, was one of the guys that was listed in this.
CC'd on the memo, apparently. But two things. One, I wouldn't get ahead of ourselves about the way they deal with it. It is a challenge. And I think George R. said this too, even during their time. It is a challenge to deal with these things and do it in a perfect way. And while Mayor de Blasio may be making mistakes in his handling of it, and I'm not defending that, this is a very difficult thing to manage your agenda when, frankly, the press's only interest is in these investigations.
But he also made his bed in many ways, Shelley, in that throughout his 2 years here, he has refused to take questions as his predecessors have, even when there's been difficult times where they'll open it up and the press corps can ask the questions. He's made enemies of the press corps because they feel that they're not allowed to get to the bottom of stories. Well, now, maybe on this one, you would say, a lot of people would say, I'm going to withhold it, let the investigation play out before I answer the questions. But again, people are again feeling they're being managed by this administration, and they think that it's an administration's like the gang that can't shoot straight here, that they can't get their act together.
I hear that, but the other point that I think we're leaving out of the conversation is this issue of campaign finance reform is much bigger than this particular inquiry. The fact is, everybody is looking for money to run their campaigns, and whether they were looking in Dutchess County or they're looking in Erie County, and money is flowing around, and there aren't enough rules, and there isn't enough guidance on it. And the fact is, there are some gray areas, and we really don't want a system where people are buying elections on one party or the other. And our focus should be on fixing campaign finance reform, allowing people to run. I happen to believe in publicly financed campaigns, as they actually have in the New York City Council. But through the forest, through the trees, we ought to see what the real challenge is here. We have a very flawed campaign finance system.
As they say, stay tuned. This thing a long way from getting resolved. Okay, up next, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. They're now going after each other here, almost as if it's the general election already. And the main point of contention, at least in the last 24 hours, has been the women's vote. Can Trump take a big chunk of that, even after he's insulted a long trail of women over the years?